everyone, it's Amanda again with Designer Soup Studio. Welcome back. I wanted to say thank you, take a moment to appreciate my recent subscribers. From the last video I had, I think you guys really enjoyed it. That's really helping me keep up my desire to really push forward and put these videos out for you guys. So thank you so much for your follow, and I hope that you enjoy traveling along with me on my interior design journey. This video is about interior design initial meetings and why they are so important. So what is an initial design meeting? Well, an initial design meeting is what happens before any designing starts, any construction starts. It is that first time meet and greet, if you will, where the client and the designer, the potential client, I should say, are kind of looking to see if one, they're a good match, and two, what the next steps are. As a designer in the initial meeting is you're trying to get a lot of communication from the client just so you know how to construct a proposal for their design needs. There are so many details and different categories that can go into an initial meeting. So I'm just going to bring up a couple of instances that have popped to the surface for me recently as an interior designer. And then also I want to talk about cadence and format that I proceed with when I do an initial meeting. How do we get to the point of an initial meeting with the client? Well, for me at Designer Soup Studio, oftentimes I will reach out to the client after they have submitted what I have on my website. It's called the Uncover questionnaire. And this questionnaire is super, super important to bring a lot of questions to the surface that maybe the client knows that they want answered, or knows they have the answer to, or had no clue that that was a question that was relevant when it came to sourcing interior design services. So what will happen is a survey will come in, kind of go through the survey, look at their responses, which are incredibly helpful and incredibly insightful. Some of the questions on there are, you know, what is your budget? What's the location of the project? What are your likes of the current conditions of the space, your dislikes, etc. And it gets really detailed. So if you are a designer, I highly recommend you going to check it out and see if any of these questions will help field your prospective clients to get more of a gauge on what type of services they need. Because that, in the end, is what this breakthrough period is, to see if a client, one, needs your services full-heartedly, or you're helping them understand maybe they don't need this service, they need that service. More information grabbing that we are doing at this point in time, the best. So after that survey comes in and I've reviewed it, what I'll do is whatever method of contact that they feel most comfortable with, which was answered in the survey, it's text, email, phone call, anything like that, I will reach out and ask for a good time to talk, and I'll need 10 to 15 minutes. So I'll have an initial screening call just to see a few questions that I might have in regards to their response to the questions on the survey. They tend to either be very, very talkative at this point in time, and they blurt out a lot of information, people looking for interior design when we get on the phone call, which is totally expected. It's totally natural because, you know, you're not quite sure what to do. You have been holding on to all of this information for such a long time, and you don't know where to cast that energy. And so I'm here to kind of construct a balance for that energy. After I have like a quick 10 to 15 minute fielding call with you guys, screening call with prospective clients, then we set up a time where I can actually get on site and see the conditions of the space, take some measurements, we talk design, and this is the part that I really want to talk to you guys about. So the reason why I had led you to this point is just so you guys can see the order of events in which the initial meeting for me at Designer Soup will take place. So all of that tends to happen and is the best way for me to get to this point of the initial meeting. But with that being said, let's get into the details of what an initial meeting is. So some things that I bring along with me to prepare myself for the initial meeting. You don't want to show up empty-handed. For the entry-level interior designers out there or student interior designers, this is great notes because this is something that I really wanted to know. So I have a few things, most importantly, my tape measure, and even more importantly, my laser tape measure. So this one I just have from Bosch, but it has been a game changer because when you are at the end of your initial meeting, you want to block off, depending on the size of the scope that you had talked about while you were sitting down talking with the client. The size of the scope, the more time you need to take measurements. So I had recently about half of a house that was probably, I don't know, 3,000 square feet or so. I gave myself about 15 to 20 minutes because I am not the quickest at field measuring. I like to take my time, and often clients really like to talk to you during this time, which kind of distracts you, which happens all the time, and it's okay. But it's good to let your clients know that, hey, I just need this time. I can't really be interrupted. I'm just going to grab a bunch of measurements. That was a really big subject when it comes to what you're going to want to grab at this initial meeting. But other items are printing off a Google map of where the project site is located, so you can write notes on the back side of it, bringing a notebook to write down whatever you need, because you're going to be getting a lot of information from the client and you're going to be talking a lot. Pens, markers if you want to. I have tons of times where I have these bubble diagrams where if we're talking layout, we can kind of get as much information as possible. Nothing is set in stone. The initial meeting is something that, like I keep on repeating, is initial information grabbing. It is finding ways of communication. This right here is just me scribbling down my different you just get a grid sheet of paper and scribble down basically the outline of the home, and then you put your measurements on there too. I like to do them in 2 separate colors so I can differentiate which is which. I normally do the measurements in red and block the home out in a different color. The other thing that I do, and this has been super, super key, is just everything that was on that survey, the Uncover survey. I basically just write it down, and everything on the phone call that was new that was brought up, like, oh, we're gonna be out of town for this month, so this is the best week for demo, like all of those notes. Even if demo can't happen during that time, it's just good to get that information out and written down, and also their likes and dislikes and whatever they told you, write it down and grab it all, because that is super, super necessary. For me personally, if I do feel led to bring some sample materials, I will, and this is a little bit risky, and I don't advise this for everyone, because if I get this design going in my mind's eye, sometimes I immediately start working with materials. This is the type of designer that I am. I'll get right into the textile arena. So I'll bring some of those to kind of just show the client what textile samples are, the different sorts of them, how they all look together, how you can have, a lot of color with just different types of materials, not necessarily having to have like tons of pattern. You'll get the natural pattern within the material. And then one last thing that I do is, if I feel compelled to bring some of my own ideas with me, I'll print off some pictures, or I'll bring some pictures, and then also I will review any pictures that they had sent me via email before the meeting and make sure that we're on the same page. What happens at the initial meeting in the front end? So we talked about, leaving some time for you to measure and get all of that dimensioning and all of that information for the site, and this helps a lot with the proposal. But during the front end of this initial meeting, what I do is basically go over a lot of questioning with the client, and I let the client talk a lot. So I want to give you 3 do's and 3 don'ts in this portion. So I do want to add a huge major point that umbrellas over every single topic and kind of mishmash of information that I'm giving you guys right now, is that the main silver lining of all of this with the initial meeting is to see if you are good for one another. It's trying to figure out if this is a good project for you, if it makes sense. And that's why we have to get as much information as possible, because sometimes when things are assumed or things are not said and the design is kind of catapulted without having a lot of talk on the front end, because I know oftentimes we just want to jump in design and then we want to jump into construction. That is the absolute worst avenue that we can take, because if we don't spend the time that we need in this uncovering phase and this programming phase, then we could really be shooting ourselves in the foot when it comes to designing, because so much information is left out. This meeting is not the time to hold back. As a prospective client looking for an interior designer and trying to figure out how they can help you, the last thing you want is to not ask those questions that are in your mind. There are no stupid questions. Interior design services and the work of interior designers is not very common knowledge, so we will not judge you whatsoever. So please do not hold back, because we're here to inform. Number 2 on what not to do during this meeting is minimize. So if you're the client and you're walking a designer through your space and you're pointing out, I think we want to rip up this carpet and put hardwood, and then we're looking at these walls and we might want to add some wall paneling, and then there's this wall right here, but we just want to take this wall down. It's just a small wall. And at that point in time, it's a little tricky, because as a designer, I want to make sure that the potential client knows that a consultant is going to have to be brought in, because now we're getting into demo and construction. So we will have to have a builder or tradesperson come in to assess that, which can, number 1, increase the budget a little bit more than maybe what they thought, and number 2, just help clarify things with the design. So when it comes to space planning and moving walls, the design services incorporate, drawings and details and elevations to help communicate things to the builder. And all of this has like a chain reaction. And so when you minimize something, imagine you don't see that chain reaction in the beginning of the process, and maybe that happens too late, and then you bring up that you want to move the wall, and you're already into your design funds and your design service funds, and then you're like, oh wait, I want to move this wall. Well, then that chain reaction happens, and then that's why budgets always kind of increase unexpectedly if all of this information isn't brought up front. So with all this, again, it's just bringing awareness. As a client, what not to do at this meeting is jump straight into a solution. What I mean by that is expecting that a solution is going to be finished and complete at the end of this 1.5 or 2-hour session. Not only is that very improbable just due to the feasibility of everything when it comes to design thinking, it's very impractical, because oftentimes the first design that we think of is not always the best design. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but it is best for us to hash it out and analyze all the information and kind of sit down and think about it, rather than being so rash and brash and trying to, get that design finished right now because we're on a timeline where we need this done. We feel, like I said at the beginning of this video, we have all this energy and we don't know where to put it. I have to, go into this situation not knowing, psychologically and emotionally how they are with their mind and this idea and with their home. And that's why another thing with interior designers is we do tend to deal a lot with this psychology within directing a project. Do not think that there is going to be a solution. I can tell you right now, my studio will not have a solution at the end of this meeting. The scope of work and the nature of the design is going to dictate how much time is being put into this project. So this initial meeting is a time for me to sit with what type of design services are best to write up the proposal for. So with all of this information, is this a good project for full service, or is this a good project for a selective service? Every project is different, every timeline is different, and yeah, like I said, there's a lot of different technicalities that are unearthed during this time. Sometimes designs, depending on the nature of them, could take 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 3 years. It totally depends. All right, so now that we've talked about what not to do, let's talk about what it is a time for. So the initial design meeting and site walkthrough is a time to spill your guts. And if it hasn't been enough precedence already from what I had said before, you just need to completely spill your guts. You need to say everything that's on your mind without getting overwhelmed. It is a little bit of an overwhelming situation because you have so many questions in your head. It could also turn out into a situation where you want to spill your guts. You've thought about this as the client for so long. And then when the designer shows up for this initial meeting, you kind of just go blank and you don't even remember anything. You wanted to have your Pinterest board pulled up with this one image that you forgot to put in your Pinterest board, and then you're trying to, struggle to find all these things. It's okay. We will not rush into anything, and we'll put a bookmark, we'll look for this bed is important. But it's best to kind of utilize this time just to not really ruminate about any particular thing and don't put yourself into like this corner of trying to figure out one specific thing. It's a good time to just ask an interior designer anything in the world that you've been wanting to know, anything. Just 21 questions for your interior designer, and they'll just sit there and answer everything. I will just sit there and answer every single question that you have. Number 2 on what to do in this meeting as a client is trust the questions that your interior designer is asking you instead of getting defensive. So oftentimes we're going to ask a lot of probing questions, a lot of questions that you might not understand. I try and do this as eloquently as possible, especially with residential design. This is a very close-knit, close to the heart. If a designer asks a question about how long do you plan to be living in this space, it's just to grab the information and we're going to do something with it. Just trust what your interior designer is digging for, because all of those questions have like a huge meaning to them. It's almost like iceberg questions. Your awareness in the situation at the moment, you just see the tip of the iceberg, but really it's filling in tons of information for us as designers. Lastly, what you want to do at this meeting is make sure, if you want to have a say in the design, you want to cast your vote in the decision making when it comes to designs that are going to be later on in the process, you'll want to be present. If you're not present, oftentimes what I will do in the proposal is just make a note or an addendum and say, if you are not present at the design meetings, then you forfeit your option to vote. When it comes to having the designer on site, we share a ton of information. You as the client are soaking up all this information. Say one of the homeowners is only present. When the other homeowner comes home, that homeowner tries to communicate what happened at the meeting. There could be so much lost in translation and it'll be hard for you to keep up. And then you'll come back to me as the designer asking me all these questions and we're just backpedaling. From the very beginning is this initial meeting. If you aren't present, then it's really going to set the tone for your voting power. So make sure you're present if you want to have a say in things. I was on social media. I can't remember if it was on Instagram or TikTok, but I want to end with this. If I remember who had said it, I'll put their name up here. By communicating the right message, you give someone information that they didn't previously have. This changes their whole reality, which in turn changes what they do. And since other people's behavior affect our lives, by changing them, you are basically changing your own life. Information is how we construct our entire realities, our behaviors, everything of value. Just to be said that the more information and communication that happens, the more value is present. So as an interior designer, this initial meeting is most likely going to have a charge to it. Designers can charge anywhere from $150 up to $500 for 1.5 to 2 hours. Even though you are not getting anything tangible at the end, you are receiving tons of value in communication and in troubleshooting that you would have never have known before. This communication is value, and the next day you're going to have this prompt of knowing exactly what to do. You're going to have so much more insight, and I, the designer, am going to have so much more insight to start on the ground running. I just really wanted to end with that because I thought it was super powerful to think about that. So to my interior designers, your communication is extremely valuable. When you talk to people, they have maybe a limited depiction or understanding of what you do for a living. So just know that your time is valuable, and just to communicate that to your prospective client. And prospective clients out there, just understand that this is something that will help you greatly, and we only aim to help in the situation and provide all of this information for anything that is to proceed with the project after the proposal is written. So there you have it. What an initial meeting is, the 3 do's, the 3 don'ts, and I really hope this has given prospective clients or prospective individuals who want to reach out to an interior designer the expectation and what you can expect to see when you interact or engage with an interior designer, because that is a little bit unknown and foggy. And then for interior designers, what I do, my process, and all of that. If you're looking for interior design services, visit my website at designersoupstudio.com. There's a short survey that you can fill out, and once you fill that out, I'll reach out to you. I do work virtually and remote, and my studio is in Alexandria, Virginia.